Do you remember a few months ago when I was driving this car?
Remember when you used to have a nice car?
Hey Doug, remember when I had this nice blue car?
Remember when you drove it into the garage?
When I drove it in the garage? What did you do to my car?
So is this why your wife won't talk to me anymore?
Oh, you're recording.
This is good stuff. We're using this. This is the intro.
There we go.
Hi friends, my name's Doug. Welcome to Third Straw Garage. I'm Statler. This is Waldorf. If you're a Muppet fans, you know what we're talking about. I'll be honest with you, I have no idea what episode this is. It might be episode 8. In the restoration of a 66 Beetle named Hendrik. Dale and I have been working on this for 6 months now.
Yeah,
5 months,
you know,
somewhere around. We started September or August, I think, on it, and it's been a little while since there's an update. So if you're one of our East Coast friends that are excited to catch what's going on, this one's for you. Sorry it's taken too long. We're not professionals. We don't do this for a living. I'm not a welder. I'm a guy with a welder. Here's a chemistry teacher. So he advises me on the chemicals that I'm mixing up and tells me what I'm doing wrong. So here's where we are. I want to bring you along, and I may intersperse some pictures on top of the long monologue here. This is a really fun learning adventure for us, and every step of the way we're figuring new things out, and I've always said the biggest thing you need is a willingness to try. And so I hope you're enjoying this journey with us, and I hope that you're learning along the way. Maybe you're watching this and the year 2030 because you're doing your restoration, or maybe you're just following along on the adventure with us. We took a car that was beautiful. If you haven't seen it, go back to some of the earlier videos, and Dale's starting to cry. But the car wasn't right. It wasn't square. The body wasn't as good as it could be, and we really wanted to take it apart and do it right. So part of our journey of figuring that out is we've never stripped paint off a car. Do we use chemical? Do we use grinders? Do we use, what are those? Carbide wheels.
Which brand do we use?
Yes, and how many of them do you go through, and how much noise will your neighbors put up with, and are some ways better than others? Do they put too much heat in the panel? Do they warp it? Do you need to wire wheel it and sandblast it? Do we want to do a body off of the body pan or not? So we kind of jumped in and started figuring out. At the same time we were wire wheeling, I started working on the A-pillar, the hinge pillar, a little bit on the fender well there, and then we kind of realized, okay, we're jumping too far ahead with that. We need to get all of the paint off. And so we started wire wheeling, and then made the commitment to say, all right, we're going to sandblast it. And we are in, let me quick turn this a bit. I'm going to pick you off the, we're in my parking garage, trying not to get dizzy and nauseous as we work here. Sorry about that. The heated shop, which is third stall, is next door. And you can see that's my Mustang project and my daughter's Subaru project. So we turned this side into a sandblasting room. And I think we've got some videos of it that you'll see. We hung tarps here on the end to block the door, and the side to block the other side. It's cold, it's unheated here. Dale masked up and bundled up every single week to do this sandblasting and spend hours doing it. And sandblaster held up well. We used a good friend, John Wilson. John Wilson, if you're watching, you're the best. Let us use the sandblaster, and we learned a ton about sandblasting while we did it. Sorry, there's a really bad light reflection. We're gonna go back this way. So we've finished now with the sandblasting. Dale did a fantastic job. we're intentionally not trying to add up the hours that Dale put into sandblasting this. It's probably somewhere along the lines of 6-7 weeks of 3 to 4 hours of sandblasting a week, and 4 buckets of from Harbor Freight of the glass beads. Was it 80 grit?
80 grit. We'll get a picture and put it in there.
Yes, it's like $80 a bucket. We went through 4 buckets of it. It was a lot of time, and air compressor ran for a long time. But here's what we've got, and we're done. And let's take you on a tour, and we can show you what we've uncovered. One of the things that made us glad that we sandblasted is we now know virtually everything about the car. There's really not any more of, have we taken it apart enough? Are there other problems that are hidden inside? We now know exactly what needs to be fixed, what needs to be done yet, and we feel like now the problems are evident, the mysteries are somewhat solved, and it's time to start reconstructing it and making it into the car that we've always kind of wanted it to be. So let's show you what we figured out. We're here at the front of the car, and you know, I keep saying Dale did a really good job, but Dale, it looks like you missed some paint on the front. What's going on here? Tell me about the front of the car. And how did maybe this is a good time to do a quick recap of how did we get to starting this project?
Yeah, you know, in a lot of ways, the whole thing started with me realizing my front hood here didn't actually fit very well, and you were learning about welding and working on the Mustang, and I said, do you think we could take off that front clip and put it in properly, put it back together properly? And you were like, yeah, I think we could do that, and it seemed like, let's just take care of the front. But obviously if we do that to the front, we're gonna have to have paint. And that started me thinking, do I really want to have a nice paint job just from the windshield forward? The windshield had a crack in it. There were other miscellaneous little pieces that I knew of. And I'm like, let's just go at it and fix some of these other pieces that we had. And it has 5 layers of paint on it. So that became get the paint off, which became finding loads of Bondo and just how in many ways poorly it was welded. And so we just kept discovering more, and on one hand it was kind of depressing because of that, but yet I really, now that we're on this side of it, I really feel like like you said before, we now know the extent of it and it's all fixable. And I've committed then to let's bring this car back to a really great state, not just a kind of fix, which it feels like that's maybe what was done maybe even 30 years ago, 20 years ago. With what I have. I've owned it for 10 years. So yeah. So this part here, we never intended to take the paint off because we're gonna pull that off and redo it.
So your biggest telltale sign was that the curve of your hood did not match the curve of the unibody, correct? And the curve of the hood went out farther, which made us think that this was moved in somehow. But we can see now, there's a seam through here. That was not at all evident before, and was completely covered in Bondo. And that seam was covered in Bondo as well. That was covered by the gas tank. So really, until we started taking paint off, we kind of assumed we would see some sort of repair underneath at some point, and until we started taking the paint off, we really didn't. So it's been telling a story to us all along of what repairs have been done. So right now, Hendrik is just on some car dollies and a dolly in the back. So it's, you know, a complete rotisserie would be nice. We're gonna settle for cars on wheels. This repair here, let's do a quick walk around and show you kind of what we know now that needs to be done. This is the spot where we will probably take the front nose off and either correct it to match the hood, fix this, what's it called, a seal channel. Or we'll be pulling a nose off of the Hendrik Beetle, which is our parts car. Merriman Beetle, which is our parts car. You can see right in here was a seam. I've done some work on that already, so it's smooth and welded well. We need to patch this one yet. It also brings us to these fender mounting nuts. This one's not real pretty. This one's missing. This one's not real pretty. We've got one that's in pretty good shape there and one that's in good shape there. So, and then the other challenge that we have is this right here is a real low spot. So this front quarter panel here is not too bad. We got a couple high spots, but overall, it's doable. We may need to pull out a couple low spots in it, but all in all, it's not too bad. If we continue working our way around the car, next we come to these hinge pillars, and they're a pretty critical part. You can see we've got some previous work that was done on it. Let me grab the other light. We've got some previous patches that were made that need to be done better, and then patches all along the inside here. The other side, we've already done some of the repairs on that. You can see that side's a little bit better, but we're just getting to the hinge pillar over there. Learning that the hinge pillar's gotta be done really well. This curve on the pillar, aesthetically, your eye can pick it up really well. It also, you know, if it's off, if it went down and kicked out, but it also sets your hinge location for your doors. So when we get to the point of addressing that, we're gonna need to really test fit our doors, because the doors need to mount flush to the body, which we didn't have before. And the doors were a little proud on the bottom. So we're gonna have some episodes coming definitely about sheet metal repair, and definitely episodes about the hinge pillars and how to do those. The back of the doorway also has some patches. There was a ton of Bondo work that was in there that needs to be fixed and done better. These welds need to either be blended or repaired. You know, we don't need to be having gaps in there and things like that. This is also...
I can hop in. This is the carpet channel, and you can see how wide it is. It looks like it was, right here, it was replaced with the hood seal channel. And that's why the carpet never actually fit. It's the wrong size, the wrong thing. So, you know, just things like that, pretty little, but it makes a huge difference in the final look of the car.
Yeah. So this heater channel seems to be really nice and solid. We'll have a better look at that when we do the body off, but we're gonna need to address this joint and decide whether we just leave it and seam seal it, or whether we weld this solid and try to blend it smooth. There's a couple welds there that look like they didn't have their gas on, or there's porosity in it. Part of the problem is before there was just Bondo in all of those edges. And so it took us sandblasting to really get a good look at it and decide what to do. Moving on to the rear quarter, you know, this is all really good shape through here until you get to the bottom of the quarter. And they did a patch there. This is a real low spot. So there's gonna be some work that needs to be done to probably fix that patch. You know, they just filled it in with Bondo. Ideally, we would like to use Bondo as a filler, but not a 1/4 inch thick filler. And then there's some repairs that need to be done on here to make that work a little better. This fender mounting surface is just really bumpy. Some of that might be what it is, and we'll have to use some Bondo. Some of that we may need to go through the learning curve of working with a dent puller to pull that out. Dale, do you know what all these holes are?
No, they were full of Bondo, so maybe part of them pulling out a dent?
That could be. If so, then we may use those holes again, and then they should be welded up and not filled with Bondo. And then the rear fender well, again, we've got another big long seam that goes to the back, and that can be just done a lot better. What do you call this? The fender, the luggage tray.
Yeah.
You know, the luggage tray shows evidence of patches, little screw patch in, some welds on the side. Again, now that all of it's exposed, we can figure out how we want to best repair it. It will be all covered, but this is a chance for us to repair things correctly. And so there will be videos on all of this coming as well. Moving around the back.
Maybe we want to spin the whole thing.
Let's spin the whole thing.
Get better light.
All right, let's switch the rear into better view. Better light. All right, Dale, what'd you learn about the rear? There's no engine.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things too that we were originally, that, you know, the front was in bad shape in the beginning, but I also knew that this bumper bracket, it was not attached properly when when we drove it in here. The whole thing, if you had tried, it would have pointed the bumper at the ground. So we need to rethink, where is this and how does this go in? The other side, what I found is it's actually quite a decent amount of rust in it. It was all put together with Bondo. So you can see the holes, and that all feels like something we can do more with. But getting that in the right place, so that again, the hood or the trunk, the deck lid, sits right and the bumpers go right.
So I think that's going to involve a lot of test fitting of the deck lid to make sure that the deck lid and the bumper and all the bumper brackets and everything mocks up well. Dale, do you think this bracket or this piece is on wrong, or do you think it's the whole tail of it?
I really don't know. I think we're gonna have to test fit, because again, it doesn't look like they had replaced this back clip.
Yeah.
But yet at the same time, it's not in a spot where the rear bumper fits properly.
It does look like there's a cut all the way here though, on this side.
So maybe that
Interesting.
side is the problem.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we could go look at the parts upstairs, but the deck lid, the 66 deck lid that I had was mostly Bondo. It wasn't rusted, but it's severely dented. And then we have the Merriman Beetle, which is a 64. And so I'm debating about putting that 64 deck lid on my 66. If you know something about Volkswagen Beetles, some of these details in these years, 64 was the last year of a T handle. And I kind of like that look. I know it's not a 66, but I'm kind of massaging it to be a 66 with some early 60s pieces to it. And so I'm quite certain that the deck lid will fit, and the Merriman Beetle deck lid is not perfect either. So figuring out deck lid will be its own video, no doubt.
Yeah. So we're not going to be going by measurements to say, okay, from the factory, this mounting point here is supposed to be 13.5 centimeters off of some point. I did some of that work on the Mustang project. The This is going to be much more of a, let's get all of the parts that we want, start putting them on, and make sure that everything fits together perfectly and matches and pairs well, and the bumpers work, and whatever pieces don't, then we gotta work everything until the whole package comes together. And once it's come together, you weld it solid, and then get it ready to send off to paint. So having everything test fit is going to be key to what we do. All right, around to this side, we've got similar welds that need to be cleaned up. That is fine the way it is. You know, if you're covering it with Bondo, that's fine, but it's not as good as it can be. We've kind of come to what was a phrase that we used, not good enough, but...
Oh, good enough rarely is.
Good enough rarely is, and we want to do a job so we feel good about it, or something. I forget. It was really pithy and catchy. This quarter's in pretty good shape, nice and smooth, rust free. Again, there's a patch down in the corner, and there's a pretty significant dip right here. This fender mounting surface is probably one of the better ones that we have all the way around. You can see we haven't taken the rear spring plate off yet. That will come when we separate the body from the pan. This side, similar issues with the bottom of the door. Inside, we talked about the luggage tray. And this is where we had some pretty significant rust behind the hinge pillar. And so we have removed this radius. This is gonna have to get cut out. We have a patch that will go in. This has already been replaced. And we need to remake the slide for the heater cover. And obviously a patch up front that needs to get and created as well. And that pretty much brings us back around to the front. This was a weld through here that I've gone through and cut out the weld because it was an overlapping weld instead of a butt weld. Welded it in. So that blends pretty good. It's not perfectly smooth. I mean, it's smooth to the touch, but it's not perfectly flat. So it will require a little bit of Bondo. And then we need to work on the fender mounting nuts to get those in good shape, which brings us back to the nose, which needs to be fixed as well. Dale just reminded me we've got a little bit more work inside here. So this floor pan is in pretty good shape. The fronts are in good shape. This one was replaced at one point in time. I assume it rusted out. Not a real good high quality job. It's not a thick piece of sheet metal. So we have a replacement panel. This will need to get cut out and replaced. And then somebody wanted really easy access to the tunnel and got a little aggressive with the grinder. So they cut 3 giant access panels to the tunnel. So we will need to fix those and weld them up. Right now, the majority of this still has the original tar board on, which we'll have to decide whether that stays or comes off. It's original and on pretty well, which might make sense to leave on. Sometimes it's nice to get it all off and paint it too. Dale's gonna have to make that decision. All right, for sandblasting, Dale, we're back in the warm side of the shop because it's like, I don't know, 30 degrees outside. This is a sandblaster that we used. And Dale, tell us about what you learned with Central Pneumatic glass bead 80 grit blast media, 50-pound box of it. Part number, I don't see a part number on there. It's at Harbor Freight. You can find it there. What did you learn?
Yeah, I think, there we go. You know, one of the things that I learned is it's just a slow process. It really is. I'm sure, you know, in a non-portable professional, they know, I don't know, whatever. But it just took a long time, so you got to be patient with it. I would go with when you had a brand new bucket, boy, the sand just flowed really, and it's not sand, it's glass beads, but I keep saying sand. But the media just flowed really easily. And when you had the compressor, everything had been built up, and so it was under some good pressure. And boy, you could just get a lot done. And for Bondo, that was huge. And I had tons of Bondo. So it could really take the Bondo down quickly. But then, of course, the Bondo is just turning into dust. So the dust is all over, so it's hard to see. And the dust is also getting mixed in with the media. So I'm doing the N95 mask, and I've got goggles on, and the goggles are steaming up, and I've got hearing protection, and I've got a picture somewhere in the video. I'm sure Doug will put the picture of me. I'm suited up to try and get it, but it's its own challenge just to see what you're doing when it's all dusty and whatnot. But when you get to just the paint, again, 5 layers of paint in many spots, but some places, like whoever painted it red, didn't really do a lot with the red. They only did the outside stuff. So sometimes they didn't have that full paint, but taking the paint off, it would go pretty quick. So sometimes a little faster, sometimes a little slower. And then I would just run out. The media wasn't coming out anymore. I'd shake, and then I felt like it was probably making a funnel inside, and then it would fall in, and I'd get a bunch of it, and it was a little spurty. And at some point I'd have to take it and stop, let the compressor rest, and I'd run it through just a window screen that we had. And that would catch all the paint flakes and rust that would come off and any chunks. But then I would be sweeping that up, and I'd catch it. Some of it would get caught in the tarp. From the picture, you can see we had the tarp around, but so that was easy to collect. But then you're also sweeping off of the floor, and as you had the powder, it started to cake up more and more. And so that's where I started to buy another, after 2-3 weeks, I would go and buy a brand new bucket, and it would flow a lot faster, it'd flow a lot better. It wouldn't clog up in the hose. Sometimes the hose would kind of clog, and I'd have to shove air backwards through it and take off the top and do a little volcano up, and then it would run for a while better. So some of it was just go and clean up, go and clean up, go and clean up. I'd usually end up doing about 3 rounds in the 3-4 hours that I'm working here. So, and you just couldn't get that much done. When we were finished, this was kind of the big surprise. And maybe if you've got more experience with one of these things, you'll laugh at us. But we wanted to collect the media so we could put it into the cabinet, because there's still a lot of little pieces that we've got to do, and so we're going to put the nicer stuff into the cabinet. So we took this and we tipped it upside down, and it poured out 2 buckets of sand of the media.
So there's a lot more stuck in there than we anticipated.
Yeah, so I kind of wish, maybe I bought an extra bucket or so. But we could have maybe done that 1 or 2 of the nights. After a while, we could have tipped the whole thing upside down, cleaned out the tank, and refilled it, because I think it was making the funnel, but there was more in there than I realized. And then, of course, you're getting it everywhere, not only in the garage, but also in the car. So we spent, both Doug and I together, we vacuumed it and blew. So you were running an air hose, blowing and vacuuming and blowing and vacuuming. And we spent probably 2 hours doing that, trying to get it out of the car, because it's in every nook and cranny of the car. And I'm sure when we pull the body off and we start tipping things around, we're going to find more. But it's, in my opinion, it's worth it, because we got all the nooks and crannies blasted, and we got the welds cleaned out from the Bondo, because every one of those welds was full of Bondo, and that all just needed to get clean. So
yeah, fixing welds that have bits of Bondo in them just doesn't go well. The glass bead that we used is 80 grit. There are tons of different media, tons of different grit levels. Some are really aggressive, too aggressive. Some are really fine and aren't aggressive enough. You know, we didn't get to the point where we tested 10 different types of media. I'm sure there are people out there that will be kind enough to post comments below sharing what they've learned. I know my Mustang here, it was sandblasted by a previous owner, and I'm still getting like a black aggressive metal grit that drops out of the frame rails every time that I pound on it or move it around, or it gets into all the nooks and crannies. So it's a lot of what we've learned. Hopefully you've enjoyed the ride and it's been helpful for you as well. I have an 80-gallon compressor upstairs. It's a 50% duty cycle, so remember, you need to let them rest. They're only supposed to run 50% of the time. And if you want to do a project like this and you don't have a large compressor, you're not going to be able to do this, a little pancake compressor or a little 5-gallon kind of home use compressor. That's good for pumping up tires and things like that. But if you're going to do this a lot, you'll probably need an even larger compressor than what we've got. All right, I think that comes close to wrapping up where we are with this video. Hopefully next week we're going to bring the Beetle, hopefully the weather permitting allows us to bring the Beetle back over to the heated dry side of the shop. Oh, they're both dry. To the heated side of the shop. And then we are going to make a plan for what metal to work on first and then get started on that. So thanks for being part of Third Style Garage. Love that you're following along. Hopefully you're enjoying it. Have a good day. Be kind to one another. Thanks.